What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your co-host Donovan Quick, and we've been struggling with the off-season content, so Jacob and I were throwing back ideas back and forth at each other, and we finally came up with the idea: why not do a summer series on expectations for players for the upcoming season? We have a lot of great players on this team. What can we expect from them this upcoming season? And maybe it'll be fun next offseason to kind of look back at it and be like, oh, well, we were spot on or we were dead wrong. So, we're going to go ahead and start with Tua Tagovailoa, our QB1. First and foremost, he played all 17 games last year, so hopefully the expectation is that he plays it again. But before we go into his true expectations, I want to bring you back to some of his stats over his career so far. As we know, his stats under Brian Flores, not that ideal. I'll glance over those briefly. Played in 10 games his rookie year, only threw for 1,800 yards, only 11 touchdowns, and his interception ratio is not that good, 11-5. He took 20 sacks in those 10 games with just a 87 rating and a 44 QBR. Wasn't good by any means. Improved a little bit the next year. Played in 13 games, so just 3 more games. 2,600 yards in those, so he threw for 800 more yards in just 3 more games. That really improved. He had 16 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, so the touchdown interception ratio closed, the gap closed a little bit on that. He did not have a better year on that end. Once again, took 20 sacks, this time in 13 games, so not as bad with the sacks. He did have a 90 rating and a 55 QBR, so improved in that area. Then you bring it to the McDaniel era. And his first year in the McDaniel era, I would arguably say he looked better. When I go back and I look at the highlights and the tape, McDaniel rookie year Tua was better. He was a lot swifter, and he was able to laser the ball in. He looked more mobile. He looked like he didn't really question too much about some of his throws, right? He was determined with his throws. And, that year, Tua, 13 games, so once again, still not at that par of the 17 games of last year, but he threw for 3,500 yards, which was more of an average. 3,500 yards in the 13 games was actually a higher average than this past year of only 8.3 yards per completion. He had 8.9 last year. 25 touchdowns in just 13 games to only 8 interceptions. So that is where he took that massive leap of touchdown interception ratio of a little over 3, right? He did get sacked 21 times, but once again, that's the most times he's been sacked in his career. Only 13 games though. And his rating jumped up from 90 to 105 from his sophomore to his junior year so far in the NFL, with a 70 QBR. So that jumped up 15 points in the QBR department, right? And then you bring it to this past year. And this past year is really when you got to see the full thing put together, the full year put together. And he threw for 4,600 yards, led the entire NFL, while averaging less yards than he did, less yards per completion than he did the year before. He had 29 touchdowns, so just 4 more than the year before in 4 more games. But he also had 14 more interceptions. So he had a lot more. He had 6 more interceptions in 4 more games. So his touchdown interception ratio actually, closed the gap a little bit. It was just over 2 last year. So once again, kind of going by these stats, I'm right so far in my analysis of, Tua in that, first year of McDaniel looked better. And the stats are kind of backing it up a little bit. He did take 29 sacks. His rating went down a little bit to 101.7, and his QBR jumped down 10 points to 60.8. And, those stats, they're not too big of a difference between last year and the year before, right? But the biggest difference that we saw is that he was able to play the full 17 games. And why is that? Because he learned how to fall so he didn't get his concussions. And he was able to take and absorb hits, right? We did see his rushing dramatically actually increase from the year prior, but still not to the standard of what it was when he was with Flores. When he was with Flores, he had over 100 yards in each year rushing, with 3 touchdowns in each year rushing. Fumbles was a big part of this. He had 0 fumbles lost in his rookie year, only 3 his sophomore year, only 2 the first year in McDaniel, but he had 13 fumbles last year. Now, he didn't lose any fumbles in any of the years prior besides last year, where he lost 5 of the 13 that he fumbled. So, taking care of the football, that's going to be a major point of emphasis on this offseason. That's going to be a major point of what we're going to be, talking about with Tua. And we're going to be talking more probably about his rushing side and his mobility side than I would say his passing. So what do I expect from Tua? Well, he slimmed down a lot. He probably looks a little bit thinner than I would say than his first year with McDaniel. So I expect him to be a lot more swift in his movements, be able to move around in the pocket a lot more. A lot of the reason I would say that he struggled with sacks last year is because he had all that pressure up in his face. You look back at the tape and it's like, okay, when someone's coming up the middle, you want to scramble to the outside, and with players like Lamar and Mahomes, they have the mobility, and even Josh Allen, of course, but even Mahomes, they have the mobility to be able to, okay, have pressure, scramble outward. When Tua went to scramble outward, he had some guy in his face on the left side or the right side. And so offensive line has to do their job, right? And when he wants to go step up in the pocket, then pressure's there again. So it's going to be really important that the offensive line just does their job correctly, and he does the job correctly of making sure everybody knows their assignments on each and every single play. That's going to be his job as the coach of the offense, basically, while he's on the field. He is the coaching the offense when he's on the field. That's just how it is. That's how the NFL works. That's how Brady did it. That's how Breeze did it. It's how, all the greats, Peyton Manning, they were meticulous. Even when you watch the Netflix show Quarterback last year on Netflix, you're able to see how important offensive line assignments are for Patrick Mahomes in his pregame. So you're able to see all that. You're able to just dial in. And that's what Tua needs to do this season with that. That being said, I want to see his passing numbers kind of go back to what it was the year before. I don't really necessarily want to say, okay, you actually need to blow us out of the water, 5,000 yards passing, over 9 yards per completion, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about, I want to see that touchdown interception ratio be at like 5-1, 4-1. I'm even okay with 3-1, right? Because if you're passing for, 30 touchdowns, I'm okay with 10 interceptions. But I don't want 29 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. I don't want 16 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And for you guys that are wondering about fantasy relevance, I do think his floor is a top 10 QB in fantasy football because he's able to throw for all those yards. And if you look at last year, he was QB 10 or 11 last year based on your league's settings. And you go into it and you're like, oh, well, Mostert had 21 touchdowns. Achane had, almost 10 touchdowns or 10 touchdowns on the dot, something like that. You get some of those, 5 of those, over 20 touchdowns, and you give it to Tua for passing when you have Jonnu Smith there and Odell there to help with the red zone. That's pretty significant. And, Tyreek's never been a touchdown guy throughout his career. You look at his stats with Kansas City, he never really had more than like 6 touchdowns in a season. He had over 10 last year, I believe. So yeah, you go with this, and you kind of see the expectation for Tua is like, okay, we need to dial it up a little bit here, dial it back a little bit here. So then you go to the rushing side. And the rushing side, I want to see Tua, you know, I'm not saying I want to see him be a rusher. I want to see him be able to escape the pocket. I want to see him be able to, you know, create plays. I want to see plays like that against the Jets at home, where he ran over Jordan Whitehead and the whole stadium erupted, and it just got the offense going. It got the whole team amped up. Like, yeah, that's not necessarily what you want to see when, like, all the time. You don't want to see him trucking over a defender, because not all the time is it gonna work. You know, some of the time it may backfire. But I want to see the aggressiveness with his runs rather than, you know, he kind of just went down and protected his body last year. And it got him to 17 games, so I'm not complaining too much. But I don't want him to, you know, pussyfooted around all the time. I want to see some aggressiveness with some of his runs. I wouldn't mind him running for 3 touchdowns like he did in the Flores era. You know, be able to scramble around, see nothing's there, and just run it in. You know, I want to see him scramble for more first downs when the opportunity arises. Last year he was, you know, playing at 230, 240. You're not really able, when you're at that weight to his height, you're not really able to be that mobile. Now he's going to be playing around 210, 215, and at 6'1", he has the ability to still, you know, move it and book it and get that first down. When it's time for those critical first downs, we saw it a little bit at the end of last year, and it's like, okay, that the plan is for him to get thinner, the plan is for him to get more mobile, and that's what I really want to touch on. And it looks like it. And it looks like he is working on being able to thrust the ball out, using much more of his hip movements than he ever has before. And just be able to launch the ball, get more velocity on the ball, and really be able to fit in those tight windows like he was in the year before. Like, he didn't really force it this past year like he did the year prior. And oddly enough, forcing it worked better last year. Don't know how. Don't ask me how. Just did. There wasn't that many drops, or wasn't as many interceptions. It just worked. So all in all, I expect Tua to show more elusiveness, to be able to run for those first downs, to be able to scramble a little bit more, throw on the run like he did the year before. It was really fun to watch Tua the year before. Now, don't get me wrong, it was fun to watch Tua this past year. The year before, it was something special to watch. It was like he was finally unlocked, and he dialed it back a little bit last year, and at times it held us back. Now I want to see full force Tua, 17 games. He has the jiu-jitsu training, so his neck is going to be stable when he falls. He's not going to slam his head into the turf. He's going to be able to do all the things he did the year prior, maybe even a little bit more. He has a much better understanding of this offense. He has more playmakers than he ever has before on offense. Like, our defense, look, it took a hit. I'm not going to lie to you. But our offense should be, dude, it should be a magical thing to watch this season. As much as everybody wants to talk about how washed Odell is and everything else, Eazy-E was special in those first 2 games that he played. And we used him in the backfield in a couple of those games as well. Then he had the neck injury out of nowhere. Don't know what happened. Out for the season. Now we have him back as our wide receiver 4 at the latest, I would say. Or at maybe wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. Look, I love Malik Washington as well. And Taj Washington, that kid is special. Taj Washington from USC might be our best jump ball guy, and he's like 5'10". Like, he can go up and get a ball. He's my sleeper, actually, and I'm going to talk about him in another video. But you have Achane, you have Mostert, you have Jalen Wright, you have Alec Ingold, all there. They added to the offensive line with drafting Patrick Paul, and we have Austin. We have Austin on the right tackle side. You know, we did take a little bit of a hit at right guard with losing Robert Hunt, and center's still kind of questionable. But I trust Liam Eichenberg to really step up at the left guard role, and I trust Butch Berry for the offensive line. And I think as long as we're able to stay healthy, which I think has been, you know, the goal with some of the offseason signings, is to really be there for the full 17 games. If we could stay even 90% healthy on the offensive line, we're going to be in great shape come late season. And I think Tua's going to pass for over 5,000 yards. I think he's going to pass for 35 touchdowns. I think he's going to have 10 interceptions. That is my expectation for the man that's about to get $55 million. Do I know if he's going to get that for sure? No, I don't. But that's if they gave Trevor Lawrence, who has done much less in this league than Tua has, and they gave him $55 million. So $55 million for Tua. You're making that. You're throwing for over 5,000 yards. You're throwing for 35 touchdowns. You're throwing for 10 interceptions. You're going to rush for over 100 yards. You're going to rush for a few TDs yourself. And hopefully you're not going to fumble as much. I don't want you to fumble as much. You had 13 fumbles last year. I want you to cut that in half. I want you to, at the most, have 7 fumbles this coming season. And I don't want you to lose any. But if you happen to lose 1 or 2, is what it is. I don't want you to lose 5, though. Interception ratio, like I said, I just want that to be non-existent. If it's over 3, I'm happy with it. If it's under 3, I ain't happy with it. All right, Tua, do us good this season. Show my expectations to be right, and let's get it done. Deuces.